Morning, 2 days before Christmas, 1814. A lone figure darts through the tangled swamps and bayous toward the city of New Orleans. The man is a Creole, commanding a party of American militia stationed at his home, the Villers Plantation, a mere 10 miles from the crowded downtown streets. He has escaped capture earlier in the day to bring a desperate message to the commander of the American Army. The man charged with keeping the country's key port safe from the British. It is here, at the gateway to the Mississippi, the lifeline for American goods and weapons, that this officer arrived a month before, so gaunt and wasted by dysentery and the travails of frontier battle that his appearance in Louisiana drew murmurs from the local crowds. This is the man who will save New Orleans? The Creole gasps out the electrifying news. The enemy, an advance guard of some 1,800 British soldiers, is not merely on the march. They are already here and have captured the Villers Plantation itself. Now it falls to a rough 47-year-old Major General who is experienced primarily in fighting Indians and Spaniards to drive back the greatest army in the world. The troops that vanquished Napoleon just a few months before. The King's 4th Regiment of war-hardened veterans. The 85th Light Infantry. The Crack Rifle Regiment of the 95th, tempered on the battlefields of Spain and Portugal, and the 93rd Highlanders, fresh from garrison duty in South Africa. But to the man called Hawkface and Old Hickory by his soldiers, this is what he has been waiting for. And the thought of impending battle is welcome. Few Americans alive hate the British as much as Andrew Jackson. After 2 years of fighting, the War of 1812 is in its last throes. Even now, negotiations are underway in Ghent, Belgium for a peace accord. But one last battle remains, here at the linchpin port of America, New Orleans.
It's not as if this attack on New Orleans is coming right out of the blue. Britain's been thinking about this for a long while. It's a great artery from the central heartland of America that can bring things out into the Gulf of Mexico, and of course from there can go out to the Sugar Islands, various places that are controlled by Britain. So for 60 years, this idea has been bubbling about, and now the British were going to do it.
For Jackson, the questions have only been where and when the British will appear. Now he knows. He decides to attack that very night.
By the Eternal, they shall not sleep on our soil. I will smash them, so help me God.
Jackson orders the USS Carolina, a 230-ton schooner with 14 mounted guns, to move down the Mississippi south of the British encampment. At 5 p.m., as darkness descends, Jackson's troops pour silently out of the city and take up positions on a plantation just north of the British.
The British Army is so sure that nothing is going to happen. Of course, they do have their pickets out, but they decide to cook dinner and to build fires because the men are wet and they're cold. They are not expecting the American army to come down where they are, and they warm themselves, and of course the light of the fires now illuminate their camps. It gives the Carolina an excellent shot.
When the ship, the Carolina, began to close, the sentries there of the Rifle Brigade thought that this was a British supply ship. They look at it, they see it getting closer, and all of a sudden, the guns open up. The thing, though, is where's this attack coming from? Because now that they've started to move, they find that there's some firing coming from the land side.
Jackson has sprung the trap, attacking the British from two sides. By the time the British regroup, the Americans are upon them. One British officer describes the scene.
Each officer, as he succeeded in collecting 20 or 30 men about him, plunged into the midst of the enemy's ranks, where it was fought hand to hand, bayonet to bayonet, saber to saber.
In the darkness, the two sides become hopelessly intermingled.
It was very difficult to see anything. So the two sides were wondering, what you might almost say blundering about, in the dark, trying to find one another and hoping that they weren't shooting at their own side. The Americans bring forward a cannon. The British almost capture it. Somebody, an officer, comes up and manages to save the cannon with some people with him and is almost captured. The British don't know it, but they've almost, at that point, captured Andrew Jackson.
With British reinforcements arriving, Jackson orders his men to fall back. The brief encounter makes a lasting impression on both sides.
It's more of a skirmish by European standards, but it's made the British think. And it's made the American troops think that maybe they've got a chance against the British.
What neither side realizes is that the battle they have just fought will be the last official battle of the War of 1812. The Treaty of Ghent, ending all hostilities between Great Britain and the United States, is signed at a Belgian monastery at 6 p.m. December 24, 1814. But in New Orleans, the conflict is just beginning. A conflict that will coalesce and define a fledgling nation, transforming both the men who have come to do battle and the nation for which they fight. In the 2 bloody years since war against Britain was declared, the War of 1812 has proved arduous for the Americans. Along the eastern seaboard, ocean-going British troops have raided towns with impunity. In the summer of 1814, they briefly capture Washington, D.C., burning the public buildings of the capital and nearly capturing President James Madison. The causes of the war are many. The British are accused of inciting the Indians against American settlers on the frontier and seizing American ships and conscripting American sailors into the British Navy. As England is entangled with Napoleon, America has turned a covetous eye to the British territories in Canada. Britain hopes to withhold the Indian land as a buffer zone between its former colonies and their Canadian holdings. But to many, the War of 1812 seems to test the American Revolution. Only if the upstart republic can organize and fight can it hope to retain the hard-won rights and territories stipulated in the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Of these territories, few are as vital as New Orleans, once held by the Spanish and the French, now in the possession of a young nation. Almost 40% of the produce and goods of the young republic flow down the Mississippi River through what has been dubbed the Crescent City.
Everything from west of the Alleghenies to the southern plains of Canada to the Great Plains themselves had to move down the Mississippi River and past the port of New Orleans. So whoever controlled New Orleans controlled the interior of the continent.
As Thomas Jefferson observed, America now has an Achilles heel.
There is on the globe one single spot, the possessor of which is the natural enemy of the United States. It is New Orleans.
If Great Britain had been able to gain access and capture New Orleans, they could have used it as a stranglehold for the development of the United States. They very easily could have choked off all trade from the interior of the continent.
And now, in December of 1814, a British fleet of almost 15,000 veteran troops and 50 ships, fresh from their victories against Napoleon, converges on this vulnerable spot.